let's talk. Obviously, the AJ situation, if that's all right, mate. What a night that was. Obviously, Usyk showed how good he really is, and I think I personally had predicted him to win a decision before the fight because he is just elite. But once you watched it back, I'm assuming you did. What was it like for you watching it back?
But frustration is a good word because, the one thing I didn't want him to do in that fight was try and outbox Alexander Usyk. And that was exactly what he tried to do. Now, was that down to stubbornness? Was that down to a bit of lack of confidence of what he was supposed to do or the game plan particularly? I think a little bit of both, to be honest with you. I think that too much information, too many points of view. I mean, if you look back on the fight, in the ring, AJ's a very strange cat when it comes to ring walks anyway. He's stopping, he's going back, he's seen some lady down there. She used to cook him lunch after his training in Finchley. He goes over to him, he gives her a hug. I'm walking out thinking, where's he gone? What's he doing?
It was bizarre.
He's back there high-fiving someone, but that's not a sign of that he's not focused or he hasn't trained. He's just, but when he gets in the ring, he goes over. Clifton Mitchell's there, who's runs our security. He used to be a heavyweight fighter, fought for the British heavyweight fight, and he starts talking to him about the fight. Do you know what I mean? Oh, what do you think? What do you think, Cliff? And what that tells me more than anything is just a lack of confidence of the game plan and of what I have to do. If you know categorically what you have to do, and you know that if you don't do it, you're going to be fucking told during that 1 minute break between rounds what you got to do anyway, you don't go searching for the answers. Do you know what I mean? The problem is sometimes with AJ is he's smart. You can't bluff him, right? So you can't go up to him and say, mate, what you got to do is do this. And he goes, yeah, right. He needs to know that he's got the strategy right. He's prepared. He's executed it in training, repetition. When he boxed Andy Ruiz in a second fight, they said to him, you have to fight like this, right? Wasn't his most entertaining fight, but he followed the instructions down to a T and won every single round. When you start searching for too much information, things become confusing. When people say, I think he's lost a little bit of his killer instinct. No, what he realised after a while is that he just can't fight like he does and have a long career and just rely on that style to beat everyone. When he boxed Klitschko, it was only brawn and heart that got him through to win that fight. All of a sudden he goes in, even when he fights Povetkin, he's having a bit of a war, fights Andy Ruiz, stuns him, thinks he can just walk through him, and realises that you need more strings to your bow. So he starts focusing more on boxing, right? Which actually won him the rematch. But there's a time and place. Do you know what I mean? The AJ that boxed Klitschko would have probably beaten Alexander Usyk that night, or certainly had a much better chance of beating him than the AJ that turned up that night. But it's not just about, you see the man on the street says, what's he doing? You got to stick it on him. It's not as easy as that. And we shouldn't take away from the brilliance of Usyk and the footwork of Usyk, because he made AJ second guess himself too many times in the fight. You see the way he raises the level, Usyk, and he doesn't let you set your feet.
But you never stop moving. So, if you're going from Pulev, who by comparison was a fucking statue, robot, you know what I mean? He constantly made AJ have to think. And but
the thing is with Usyk, the way to beat him. I mean, Chisora for the first 3 or 4 rounds did all the things that actually is effective against Usyk, right? Which is to basically, when you talk about not letting someone set, once Usyk's on that back foot and loses his own balance, right? That's the time where you can jump all over him and hurt him. And listen, Usyk said after the fight to me, AJ hurt me, he can punch. He didn't hit him. I think he hit him with a couple of clean shots, hurt him to the body a couple of times. But he never landed a power punch, AJ, in 12 rounds.
I don't know if he threw one.
Yeah, I think you're right. But that's because, as well, sometimes you're overthinking to a point where, I can't throw that yet because, I'm not set here and, he's waiting to do that. No. You back him up, you make him lose his balance, and when you do, you jump all over him and you beat the fuck out of him. Do you understand? And that's what he needed to be told, I think.
Absolutely.
During that fight.
I think they were too much admiring it, too much worrying about what Usyk does well without worrying about what AJ does well. And I think part of that is the stamina factor of Usyk was a concern. Yeah. It's like if you pull the trigger the way you normally do, if you don't get him out of there with that pull of the trigger, with Pulev, you can take a few rounds, get your stamina back, pull it again. With Usyk, if you pull that trigger and you miss or you don't get him out of there, there's every chance he's going to run you out of town in the next few rounds. Yeah. And I felt like that made him a little bit trigger shy.
I think he thought about that as well. But I'd like to flip that in the mindset and say, pull the fucking trigger and do so much damage
that you can't. Exactly.
He ain't the same guy.
Yeah. Like what you did do Klitschko, because even after Klitschko dropped AJ, he wasn't in a position to capitalize on it.
One, he was tired, he was hurt, he was done.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the same thing with Usyk. You put enough damage and enough hurt. By the way, you get him out of there if need be.
Yeah.
I'm telling you now, AJ lands his power punches on Usyk, he will get him out of there. He will damage him, he will mark him up, and he will hurt him. So if after 6 rounds you are tired and your tank is beginning to empty, make sure that motherfucker is in pain and his legs don't work. Yeah. So, because that was the one thing I always thought in that fight, you've got to make a dent in this guy in the first 6 rounds. And he didn't make a dent in it. That was the main problem. And he let him get into the championship rounds because, listen, after 8 rounds, however way you want to score it, everyone had it reasonably close. Then Usyk just went 9, 10, 11, 12. Thank you very much. I've won all of those, and now it's a shutout. It was just, didn't he? It was just a championship round.
No, I appreciate it. You know what the fuck you're on about. Yeah.
Well, so do you, actually, which quite surprises me.
For a YouTuber. It was a masterclass by Usyk, and that's what worries me a little bit in the rematch. Is I really want AJ to win. I've become an even bigger fan of his as the years have gone by, and I think he's a great champion. I think with Ruiz, the plan to get him to the win in the rematch was so clear and straightforward. But as you say, it's a lot more complicated with a Usyk who gave him a boxing lesson. It wasn't like, he just got clipped and never recovered with the equilibrium like last time. I felt like there was levels. And as you say, there's very few paths to victory versus Usyk. So what makes this more important now coming in this is the training camp and everything else. Now, he's literally just done a great interview. Shout out to Coogan. It was a very good interview. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But some of his answers were fucking worrying me. And I wanted to because on the one hand, he was being open, a bit more aggressive. We love that. But on the other hand, there was a few things that he said, and I want to read you some of the things out. You read me a poem, I'll read you some of AJ's quote. Coogan asked what the plan was. He says, you'd have to ask the team. Now, red flag, immediate red, like that worried me. I'm like, well, either you know what the plan was and you just kind of don't want to take responsibility, or you still don't know what the plan was and you're putting the blame on them. Either way, both of those answers, it's still bad. I'm assuming you know more than I do, obviously, but like, how did you take that answer?
I feel that he wasn't comfortable with the game plan, because I think if you're seeking information from other people, and he does that a lot anyway, by the way, he likes to take in information, but too much so in that fight, where he didn't have clarity with what he was doing. So when you talk about what was the game plan, I think if you ask him honestly, I think his answer would be, I don't really know. But the team will feel they had a game plan, but it's the transition from the fighter to team to make sure that he had, put it this way, they didn't go through camp not talking about how they were going to beat Alexander Usyk. But for some reason, that plan AJ didn't have the confidence in that plan, you know, or the communication line, whatever it was.
Yeah.
The truth is, he didn't exercise. It didn't box to the right plan.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the wrong plan, or did they have the right plan but didn't manage to communicate to him in the right way?
Bro, if he doesn't
manage to build.
You see yourself, AJ is a clever bloke. He executes what you tell him to do. So if he doesn't know what the fucking plan is, that's shocking to me. Like, especially when you've had 3 months to get ready for one of the best boxers in the world, and you're talking to Clifton Mitchell in the corner. What do you reckon? What do you reckon I should do? Seconds. Whereas Usyk stood looking at you like the Terminator. You better know what you should do, mate. You're in
he knew what he had to do. But that's the key for the rematch, particularly. And if he doesn't know what to do in the rematch, but more importantly, if he doesn't have confidence in the game plan, then it's going to be a fucking hard night's work.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If he is told by someone he believes in how to win this fight, and they practice and they practice and they practice and they practice, he will beat Usyk in the rematch. Right? I truly believe that. But if he doesn't get it right, then you got to say Usyk's a huge favourite in that rematch. But clearly, whether there was a game plan or not, I'm pretty sure there was a game. But I don't believe he had a confidence in what he was doing or in that specific game plan. And that is a breakdown of communication between fighter and team.
I think it isn't the first time that we've seen that between him and Rob McCracken, and this isn't me having a go at Rob McCracken specifically, but we've seen in the Ruiz fight him saying, you know, what do I do? Like, and looking really sort of unsure of how to handle a situation. But with this one, when we're in the later rounds and AJ's clearly losing the fight, and we're here in the corner say, get behind the jab, rather than take the fight to him and rather than pull the trigger like we're all screaming at the TV to do so. And then later again in the fight, when we are all hearing, and I don't know who said this, but brilliant AJ. The whole boxing community, that line, if you look in the comments, like, is just everywhere. Brilliant AJ, brilliant, because it was such a ludicrous thing to hear at a point where you're clearly losing. Why do you think someone is shouting brilliant AJ at that point in a fight?
I think I agree with you, by the way. I heard that too much from the corner. If you're losing a fight or if the fight's nip and tuck, I don't want to be hearing that from the corner. There were certain things that there were too many voices, in my opinion, right? That not even on the night, just in general, in camp, right? Certain people were there to make him do certain things, or he was learning certain things. So, for instance, the beautiful AJ might not be, he's won the round. It might just be a specific thing that he has learned in camp or worked on at camp. There's no excuse for it. I don't even want to attempt to justify it. The one thing I'll say about the instruction from the corner, I feel that when you get to 10, 11, 12, I think there was an element, perhaps, from maybe Rob McCracken that felt that his tank was empty, right? His eye was fucked, and it was quite a bad injury, and probably felt if you get behind your jab and you nick these rounds, it may be, if you can win these rounds on your jab, we got half a chance. But sometimes you look at your fighter in the corner and know, like when he hurt his eye and he couldn't see, and it gets to 11 and 12, he took a hammering in the 12th, right? I think maybe Rob at that point knew he doesn't have the ability to go out here at this point, back him up and knock him out. That's what I think. Now, for me, the instruction should have come after 4 rounds, not 10. Do you know what I mean? Because actually, he lost, I think it was 3-1 after 4 rounds or something.
Easily,
And then, listen, then AJ had a decent little run in the middle, nicked a couple of rounds, but you've got to flag it up sooner than that. Mate, this ain't working. You haven't put a dent in him. Where's the body shot? And getting behind the jab is fine, but back him up with a jab. Move him with your feet once you back him up with a jab. Knock him off balance and then close the distance. Cut the ring off. Get your foot on the outside, not on the inside. Move to your right. Whatever the instruction has got to be. But, you know, it was a bad night at the office. But, you know, Rob McCracken's more than just a trainer to him. You know, he's a mentor. He's been an advisor. And he won him, you know, AJ won the Klitschko fight. But I'll tell you something now, he wouldn't have won it without Rob McCracken's corner. Because when he went back to that corner after the 5th round and the 6th round, and he sat him down and he said, listen to me. You know, that's the voice. There has to be that trust. The one voice. And, you know, AJ's brought in different people to work on different things, whether it's defence, whether it's footwork, whether it's pad. There's got to be, this is a sport where when you're at the bottom of the well and there may not be many ways out, the one voice you hear has got to be able to make things happen for you. Do you know what I mean? And it's a tough job. And I feel like trainers get a lot of stick when a fight goes wrong, you know, but that's the sport they're in. But, you know, I didn't like the beautiful stuff. I didn't like the beautiful stuff because if you're in there, you think it's... You know, actually, after the fight, AJ must have known he lost, but it wasn't like he thought, have I got, you know... Because
so you make a very good point.
You're losing the fight.
Yeah. Right? That was...
Look at that. Go back to, you're blowing it, son, Angelo Dundee. You know, have a little slap if you want. You've got, you know, but too many... I said to AJ, you know, sometimes you've got a great team of people. Sometimes people love you so much, they don't want to give you the bare truth, right? Some people in certain situations, and it's not really a reflection of his thing, some people want to keep their job.
Absolutely.
All right.
He's got more trainers than JD Sports, mate. It's the amount of people. When he started rattling off his team in that Coogan interview, I was like, he's like, well, I've got my main guy. Well, I've got my other main guy. I've got my other main guy. I'm like, wow. Like, you sound ridiculous, mate. Like, but, and I do know he's a sponge and he's got a thirst for knowledge. But from what I understand, he's always been this way of like, he'll listen to anyone and he'll try and absorb anything he can. Clearly why he's, you know, he's still got that mentality. But at this point in his career, I expect him on his 11th world title fight to have more of a self-assured... Like when I interviewed Tyson Fury, he basically was like, no one can tell me anything about boxing at this point in my career. I don't... you know what I mean? And I'm not saying he should be like Tyson Fury. I'm just saying at this stage...
Two very...
more like that.
But two very different people. Part of AJ, you know, in his 25th fight, 26th fight, with only 30-odd amateur fights, he's still learning. Tyson Fury... He's not, right? This is the best Tyson's ever going to be. Like he's got all the knowledge he's ever going to have. He's not really interested. Yeah, he wants direction from Sugar Hill and he wants instruction, but most of the time he's in there doing what he knows he's got to do. AJ's a different individual, but once he has the confidence and belief in what he's doing, I believe he's unbeatable. But he didn't have it that night, and it's not a case of forget why hasn't he got it or shouldn't he have that. Let's just make sure he's fucking got it.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? That's the key. But with the right instruction, with the right communication, with the right belief in that person, he will have it. That's the difference. And that's where the work goes on now and the research goes on to make sure that next time it don't happen again.
So my theory in regards to the brilliant AJ and the get behind your jab, I think AJ needs that positive reinforcement that you say you respond well to, the pat on the back. And I think that might have been just to give him as much positivity as possible and get him out of that fight in one piece and get them on the rematch. But the thing that you said about trust and trusting the voice, it feels like right now AJ has a lot of loyalty and clearly loves Rob McCracken, but the trust seems to not be there anymore. And at that point, you know, yes, he might want to keep Rob involved. And when he was asked about this, he couldn't give a straight answer. And it didn't sound good. If you're Rob McCracken, listen to it, or if you're AJ saying it, it didn't like, well, I'll have to work out if Rob wants to be involved with my next person who might teach me. And I was like... Difficult
conversation, though, to have publicly. Do you know what I mean?
It is, but he was the one who decided to have that with Coogan. You know, he was the one who... So, of course, he's going to ask the question. And... there's not long, do you know what I mean, before the Usyk fight. So I think he needs to make that decision quickly.
Yeah, I think that's why he's being proactive. You know, he didn't sit on his hands and sulk. He got on a plane. He went out to America. He travelled all around the country, speaking to people, looking at gyms, looking at ways to improve. And I think he should be commended for that.
Absolutely.
Because he ain't out partying and boozing and sulking. He's out trying to improve and trying to get himself best prepared for the rematch.
What the one other thing he said in that interview, which the final thing I'll put to you, he said, I had no indication that it wasn't going right. That was a bit of a shock, because he said I was touching Usyk, but I didn't really understand that. Do you think you should be in his corner? I mean, you could just scream at him round 4, because we're all screaming, and
But
I don't know.
That's again when you get to a stage where you need people around you. That I met him 2 days after the fight, and I sat down and said, I have to tell you honestly, this is what I think. And I told him my honest opinion, because at the end of the day, you ain't a mate if you ain't telling people the truth anyway. And if someone needs your help or needs to find a way to improve, and you're not telling him your honest opinion, and it was, all those people have been sat down individually, really, as not for a telling off, just for a chat. And it's when you sit down with them after a defeat where people start coming out saying, yeah, well, actually, this and this and this and this. Well, you didn't say that, when you're winning, no one says anything, do they? So, but you have to have people around you. And listen, he's got a lot of people around him that care for him. But the ones that care enough to stand up and say, mate, maybe I'm going to walk away if this doesn't change, because I don't believe in it. Do you know what I mean? I don't believe in the setup or this process in camp. So I'm out. But no one really does that, do they? Because one, it's a huge opportunity to be in Anthony Joshua's camp. 3, 2, you're going to be making a lot of money, and you're involved in massive nights. But a lot of people saying he's got too many yes men around him. I think he's got a lot of people that care for him, to be honest with you. And he's an unbelievable, loyal, likeable guy. But sometimes the truth hurts, and you've got to be honest to people. And you've got, like, what you've said there is spot on. Where was the person saying to him after 4 or 5 rounds, mate, you're going to blow this unless you do this? Where was it? Do you want to lose your world heavyweight titles tonight?
Yeah.
Unless, if you don't do this now.
Yeah. And that was
easy to say, isn't it? Part of it's easy to say as you and me, spitting the fat on a podcast, but a lot of it should be a formality.
Yeah. Well, you're risking your world title by not pulling the trigger. And when he says in the podcast, his interview, I watched, Fury versus Wilder, and they were blowing out their arse by round 3. It's like, yeah, but they were trying to kill each other. You weren't trying to kill Usyk. You weren't. You know what I mean? You just weren't. So that's heavyweight boxing. When you're trying to rip each other's head off, it will just it will be who wants it more. You know what I mean? And I think it really didn't reflect well on AJ when those two went to war the way they did. And he gave his belt up without a fight, in my opinion, without the fight that he gave Klitschko or Dillian White, or because we know he's got the dog in him, and that ain't really my. The dog is not what I'm sort of worried about. It's just him having that person he trusts. I think that's what he. And we've seen like you grew up around great fighters like Lennox Lewis who changed trainers, and it just revolutionized them, and Tyson Fury's done that with Kronk. It's a shame, because I think Kronk would be perfect for AJ, actually. Yeah,
well, listen, you never know. You never know. Fury come out and Fury said, I'll train him, I'll tell him how to beat Usyk. And then AJ said, yeah, why not? And then I'm thinking, because AJ's boxed Dillian White, maybe they can sort of train each other for those upcoming fights. We'll see what happens.